He wrote the manual, the definitive guide to being a perfect knight. He had fought hundreds of battles. He was Marshal of France. He was 54 years old and still a warrior. October 25, 1415, Agincourt, the most famous English victory in medieval history. Boucicaut rode into that battle in full plate armor. Confident, experienced, the best France had. The field was covered in mud, heavy, thick, sucking, after days of rain. Boucicaut stepped into it and sank. A peasant soldier simply walked over and pulled him out of the ground. Jean II Le Meingre, known as Boucicaut, born around 1366, son of a distinguished knight. From childhood, he was destined for greatness. By age 16, he was fighting in tournaments. By 24, he was a famous warrior. He went on crusade, twice. He fought the Ottomans. He fought the English. He fought the pirates of the Mediterranean. He was appointed Marshal of France, the highest military office in the kingdom, below only the king. And he wrote the Book of the Deeds of Good Boucicaut, a chivalric manual. Like Charny before him, he put the code into words. But Boucicaut would not die gloriously. He would die forgotten, in a damp prison cell, far from France, October 24, 1415, the night before Agincourt. It had been raining for days. The fields of northern France were saturated. The mud was unlike anything English soldiers had seen before. The French army was enormous, perhaps 12,000 to 36,000 men, against Henry V's exhausted English force of maybe 6,000. Boucicaut knew these odds. He had seen lopsided victories before. France should win. France should absolutely win. The French nobility was confident to the point of arrogance. They were arguing over who would get to capture Henry V, who would earn the ransom. They had already drafted the victory proclamation. They had not thought carefully about the mud. The battle began. French cavalry charged the English lines. Into the mud, the horses began to struggle. The men in full plate armor. The men weigh Jags, Jing 200 pounds with their equipment. Sank, English longbowmen fired at close range. Thousands of arrows per minute. Horses screamed and fell. Riders were thrown into the mud. Armored knights struggling to stand back up, unable to. The French mounted charge had created a pile of struggling, sinking men. English soldiers, lightly equipped, ran forward, into the mud, among the helpless knights, and began killing them, with mallets, with daggers, finding the gaps in the armor, where a man cannot reach to protect himself, while he sinks. Boucicaut was not killed. He was captured. A peasant soldier, barely armored, walked up to the struggling Marshal of France and simply pulled him out of the mud. Like pulling a turnip from a garden, the most decorated military officer in France, captured by a peasant, because he sank. The English realized what they had. A Marshal of France. The ransom would be enormous. He was sent to England, given comfortable quarters, while the negotiations proceeded. Comfortable quarters that he would never leave. Boucicaut spent the last 6 years of his life in English captivity. Yorkshire, far from France, far from the son of Gascony, far from the Mediterranean he had sailed, far from everything he had known. The ransom negotiations dragged on. France had been catastrophically defeated at Agincourt. The country was in chaos. Boucicaut's value to the English was significant, but the ransom was never paid. He died on June 20, 1421, in his prison quarters in Yorkshire. Of illness. The exact nature is not recorded. Perhaps pneumonia. Perhaps the accumulated damage of a lifetime of warfare. Perhaps simply despair. No glorious last stand. No famous last words. No sword planted in the earth. No banner held to the last. Just a cold, damp room in England. And then nothing. Jean II Le Meingre Boucicaut. He had survived crusades. He had survived pirate battles. He had survived the Ottomans. He had survived decades of warfare. He was undone by mud, by the weight of his own armor, by a peasant who knew how to walk in it. There is something deeply dark in this story. Not the death at Agincourt, but the years after. The long, slow fade. The prison cell. The forgotten ending. The great warrior's worst enemy was not a sword. It was time and waiting. Subscribe because sometimes surviving the battle is not the hard part.